They lived for the rhythm, they breathed the music, and on the very stage where they poured out their soul, they met their end. Some call it fate, others call it a tragic sacrifice. But one thing is clear, these reggae legends gave their all until their final moment, with thousands watching and no warning at all. From unexpected collapses to eerie last words, these are the chilling true stories of 15 reggae icons who died doing what they loved most, performing live. 1. The music world mourned the quiet passing of a reggae pioneer when Johnny Nash, the velvety-voiced troubadour who brought island rhythms to mainstream audiences, left the stage for the final time in October 2020. At 80 years young, the man behind the timeless anthem, I Can See Clearly Now, had just delivered what would become his swan song performance in Los Angeles before peacefully succumbing to natural causes mere hours later. Nash's final curtain call carried profound significance for those who understood his role as reggae's unlikely ambassador. Though born in Houston's concrete sprawl rather than Jamaica's palm-fringed shores, this smooth-voiced American became one of the first artists to transplant reggae's sun-kissed vibrations onto the global stage. His 1972 magnum opus, with its irrepressible optimism and lilting backbeat, served as many listeners' inaugural taste of Caribbean soul, a full 3 years before Bob Marley's international breakthrough. Those present at that fateful Los Angeles performance describe an artist defying his octogenarian status, his baritone still carrying that trademark butterscotch warmth as he guided the audience through his golden-hued catalog. Backstage, he moved with the quiet grace of a man who'd spent 60 years in the spotlight, yet never lost his appreciation for those who came to hear him sing. No one could have known they were witnessing the farewell performance of a musical bridge builder whose influence far outstripped his fame. Nash's love affair with Jamaican music began in the late 1960s, when he became one of the first international artists to record at Kingston's hallowed Studio One. His early reggae experiments laid groundwork for his historic crossover success, while his record label provided crucial early support for island artists. The bittersweet poetry of his passing during the pandemic's bleakest months, the man who sang of sunny days leaving amid such global darkness, wasn't lost on grieving fans worldwide. As tributes flowed from reggae legends and pop contemporaries alike, a consistent portrait emerged of the unassuming pioneer. Music scholars highlighted how Nash's polished pop reggae fusion created a blueprint for future cross-genre success. Jamaican musicians acknowledge their debt to this Texan, who helped their sound reach new ears. And through it all, that voice, clear as the morning he once sang about, kept playing on radios everywhere, its hopeful message now carrying the weight of legacy. 2. The last bow of a reggae revolutionary. The sticky Jamaican night air still pulsed with energy as Sugar Minott stepped off the stage at that fateful Kingston concert in July 2010. The crowd's cheers still echoed in his ears as the 54-year-old legend exchanged warm embraces with fellow artists backstage, unaware these would be his final moments in the world he helped shape. Within hours, the reggae pioneer would succumb to a sudden heart attack, leaving behind a musical legacy as sweet as his nickname suggested. Those present that evening remember how Minott's voice, that unmistakable blend of silk and gravel, had wrapped around classics like Good Thing Going with undiminished power. Even after 3 decades in the spotlight, he performed with the hunger of a young artist, his movement still fluid as he worked the stage. True to his reputation as reggae's approachable icon, he lingered afterward, sharing wisdom with up-and-coming musicians who saw him as a father figure. News of his passing spread through Kingston's music community, like a shockwave before dawn broke. Studio engineers paused their mixing boards. Dance hall stars halted mid-rehearsal. The man who had mentored so many was gone. Minott's career traced the very evolution of Jamaican music, from his early days at Studio One crafting roots reggae anthems, to his pioneering work blending digital dancehall with conscious lyrics. His Youth Man promotions became a cradle for talent, while his own recordings like Hard Time Pressure gave voice to Jamaica's struggles and triumphs. In the days that followed, tributes painted a portrait of an artist who gave as much as he received. Younger performers told stories of Minott patiently coaching them through their first studio sessions. Sound system operators recalled his generosity in sharing exclusive dub plates. Fans remembered the way his music provided both party soundtrack and social commentary. 3. The final echoes of the Cool Ruler. The stage lights seemed to dim a little brighter on Gregory Isaacs during those last painful tours. Fans would worship the Cool Ruler, for decades watched with aching hearts as a reggae legend, now gaunt and breathing heavily between verses, poured his remaining strength into every performance. The voice that once flowed like liquid silver now carried a rasp of struggle, yet still held traces of its hypnotic magic when he launched into Night Nurse or My Number One. Backstage, the scene was more heartbreaking still. Oxygen tanks waited in the wings as Isaacs conserved energy between sets. His famously elegant suits now hung loosely on a frame ravaged by lung cancer. Yet when the music started, something remarkable happened. The pain lifted from his eyes, the years fell away, and for 3 minutes at a time, he was young Gregory again, serenading lovers across Jamaica. His final London performance in 2010 became the stuff of legend. Halfway through Rumors, his breath failed him. The crowd held theirs. Then, with visible effort, he gathered himself, nodded to the band, and finished the song to thunderous applause. That was Gregory. Too proud to surrender to the disease stealing his voice, too devoted to walk away from the fans who'd loved him since the 1970s. The cancer diagnosis had come as no surprise to those who knew his struggles. The man who sang so beautifully about love had battled his own demons with cocaine addiction, a fight that ultimately weakened his body, but never broke his spirit. Even as chemotherapy drained him, he kept recording. His last album, Brand New Me, serving as both farewell and redemption song. For
everyone build no schools anymore, all the bell will be prison.
The last day of Lucky Dube, a reggae tragedy. The morning sun rose over Johannesburg on October 18, 2007, unaware would witness the final hours of Africa's reggae crown prince. Lucky Dube woke in his hotel room, humming melodies for that night's show, his suitcase half-packed for the upcoming European tour that would never happen. Back home in Durban, his 7 children went about their day, not knowing they'd already had their last breakfast with their father. Soundcheck that afternoon carried its usual easy rhythm. Dube adjusted the monitors, teasing his bass player about missing a note during Slave. The crew noticed nothing unusual as the man who brought reggae to the African mainstream joked about finally getting some rest after this final South African show. His only complaint was a slight sore throat, nothing that would stop him from giving Johannesburg one more night to remember. The concert itself became one of those magical performances where every note landed perfectly. Dube's voice, that rich instrument capable of both tender love songs and revolutionary anthems, wrapped around different colors/one people with particular passion that night. The crowd sang along to every word of Prisoner, not realizing they were witnessing the last time these lyrics would ever come alive from their creator's lips. Backstage afterward, the 43-year-old legend high-fived his band, promising to meet early for their flight to London. He made 2 final phone calls, one to his mother, one to his wife, both ending with "I love you" in his native Zulu. Then he climbed into his Chrysler with 2 of his children for what should have been a quick drive to their uncle's house. The car hadn't even come to a full stop outside the Rosenthal home when the gunman struck. Dube's final act was to shield his children with his body as the bullets tore through him. His last whispered words, "Take the car, just don't hurt my kids," would later haunt the courtroom where his killers stood trial. News of the shooting spread like a dark tide across the continent. In Nairobi, market vendors played Dube cassettes through tears. In Kingston, Ziggy Marley canceled his show mid-performance. South Africa's streets filled with mourners singing "Remember Me" through their grief, the lyrics now carrying unbearable weight. The bitter irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who spent his career singing against violence had fallen to the very crime he fought. Police would later confirm the carjackers had no idea whose life they'd taken until they heard the news reports. 5.
Dreadlocks get living a tenement, yeah. Dreadlocks get living.
Last Laugh, Jacob Miller's final hours. March 23rd, 1980 began with the usual electric energy that surrounded reggae's brightest young star. Jacob Miller bounded into the studio, that unmistakable gap-toothed grin flashing as he teased bandmates about their upcoming tour with Bob Marley. The rehearsal crackled with Miller's infectious energy, his voice dancing over Tenement Yard with playful ad-libs, his laughter ringing to the studio during breaks. That evening performance at Kingston's Crystal Garden will become legendary footage. Miller, clad in his signature striped shirt, moved like a man possessed by the music. The camera catches him mid-leap during Forward Jah Jah Children, his dreadlocks flying, sweat glistening on his face as he worked the crowd into a frenzy. Between songs, he joked with audience members, his comedic timing as sharp as the vocals. The grainy video shows something haunting in hindsight during Peace Treaty. Miller paused unexpectedly, his normally animated face turning solemn as he sang the line, "I don't want to die young." The crowd cheered, unaware they were witnessing what will become the 27-year-old's final performance. After the show, Miller's famous humor still flowed as freely as the red stripe backstage. He playfully argued with guitarist Ian Lewis about the setlist of their upcoming shows, promising to teach Bob a thing or two about stage presence when they joined Marley's tour. The last footage ever taken shows Miller climbing into the front seat of his blue Volkswagen Rabbit, waving to fans with a promise to see them tomorrow. The crash happened minutes later on Hope Road. Witnesses described the car swerving violently before slamming into a tree. Miller, who never wore seatbelts, was thrown through the windshield. The news spread through Kingston like a shockwave. The man who brought such boundless joy to reggae was gone in an instant. 6. The final chorus, Joseph Hill's last performance. The backstage lights of the club W71 in Germany cast long shadows on August 19th, 2006, as Joseph Hill toweled sweat from his brow. At 57, the Culture frontman had just delivered another powerful set, his voice, that distinctive instrument of righteousness, still ringing through the venue as fans chanted for an encore. Few noticed how heavily the reggae warrior leaned on his mic stand during the final songs, or how his hands trembled slightly as he signed autographs afterward. Earlier that evening, Hill had taken the stage with his usual prophetic energy. Witnesses remember how his eyes burned with intensity during two sevens clash, how his hands painted visions in the air as he preached through Behold. Between songs, he joked with the German audience in broken phrases, teaching them to sing the chorus of International Herb in Patois. The performance footage shows a man fully alive, his gray-streaked dreadlocks swaying as he danced across the stage with surprising agility for his age. The collapse came suddenly in his dressing room. Roadies initially thought Hill was catching his breath after the energetic show until they noticed his labored breathing. The ambulance arrived quickly, but the singer who had spent 4 decades spreading messages of African unity and spiritual awakening was already slipping away. His final whispered words, according to the band's manager, were a request to make sure his wife knew he loved her. News of Hill's passing sent seismic waves through the global reggae community. In Jamaica, radio stations played culture marathons interrupted by tearful callers. In London, sound systems held all-night vigils blasting Holy Mount Zion. His bandmates shared stories of Hill's last days, how he'd insisted on performing despite fatigue, how he'd been writing new lyrics up until showtime. 7. The final transmission, Mikey Dread's last broadcast. The dim glow of stage lights revealed a thinner, frielier Mikey Dread than reggae fans remembered when he stepped onto his final stage in early 2008. The brain tumor had stolen much of his strength, but not the fiery spirit that made him Jamaica's most revolutionary broadcaster-turned-musician. Clutching the microphone like an old friend, the man who pioneered dub spacey soundscapes launched into his signature track, Roots and Culture, with surprising vigor, his voice still carrying that familiar radio deep resonance. Backstage at the London venue, the scene told a different story. Assistants hovered nearby with water and medication as Mikey rested between songs, his famous dreadlocks now streaked with more gray than black. Band members exchanged worried glances when he momentarily forgot lyrics to Break Down the Walls, a song he performed thousands of times. Yet, when the bass dropped, something miraculous happened. The 54-year-old's eyes regained their old spark, his body moving to the rhythm like a man half his age. Eyewitnesses describe an eerie moment during African Anthem when Mikey paused mid-verse, staring into the distance as if receiving transmissions from some far-off frequency. The crowd thought it was dramatic effect until he whispered into the mic, "The universe calling me, but me not go quiet yet." He finished the set with tears streaming down his face during Peaceful World, the song's hopeful lyrics about redemption taking on new poignancy. The tumor would silence Mikey Dread's voice for good just months later in March 2008, but not before he completed his final album between hospital visits. In his last interview, the man who'd revolutionized Jamaican radio with his groundbreaking dread at the Controls program confessed he dreamed of dying on air, microphone in hand. While death came more quietly in a London hospice, his final performance proved the pioneering artist stayed on the airwaves of life until his very last transmission faded to static. Today, when DJs play his classic dubs, they still turn up the bass extra loud, just how Mikey liked it, ensuring his revolutionary frequencies keep vibrating through time. 8.
Not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth.
The Lion's Last Roar, Bunny Ruggs' final stand. The stage lights at Fort Lauderdale's Revolution lived cast long shadows on a visibly thinner Bunny Ruggs in 2013. But when the opening chords of Now That We Found Love rang out, the Third World frontman's voice still carried its trademark golden roar. Few in the cheering crowd knew the 65-year-old legend was performing through excruciating pain. His body ravaged by the leukemia he kept private. Between songs, he leaned heavily on his mic stand. But when the music played, Ruggs transformed, shoulders rolling in that familiar dance, hands conducting the band with undiminished passion. Backstage, the scene told a quieter story. Assistant helped him into a folding chair, where he sipped herbal tea between sets, his famous smile never fading as he joked with younger musicians about old man stamina. Bandmates later recalled how Ruggs would close his eyes during rests, gathering strength for the next number, only to spring back to life when his cue came. His final performances became masterclasses in professionalism, never mentioning his illness, never shortening a set, always delivering the full spectrum of his vocals from tender love lyrics to revolutionary anthems. That Florida show would be among his last. As the cancer advanced, Ruggs kept performing until he could barely stand, his final appearance coming just months before his February 2014 passing. In a heartbreaking twist, the man who sang about unity on global hits like Try Ja Love spent his final days coordinating a reunion of Jamaica's legendary session musicians, determined to leave the music stronger than he found it. When news of his death broke, tributes poured in from every corner of reggae. Fellow artists marveled at how Ruggs' voice never lost its power even as his body failed. Fans shared stories of him performing entire shows with fever, then staying late to mentor young singers. Today, when Third World takes the stage, they leave Ruggs microphone center stage during 96 degrees in the shade, a symbolic presence for the lion-hearted performer who gave every ounce of his strength to music, right up to the final curtain call. 9.
Goodness and mercy shall follow I all the days of my life.
The Crown Prince's final bow, Dennis Brown's last performances. The camera shakes slightly as it captures Dennis Brown stepping onto the stage at Kingston's Quad nightclub in June 1999. At 42, his once boyish face now carried the wear of 3 decades of non-stop touring. But when he launched into Here I Come, that angelic voice, reggae's most perfect instrument, still floated effortlessly over the rhythm. The footage shows Brown pausing mid-set to sip water, his hand trembling slightly as he wiped his brow, the only visible signs of the respiratory illness slowly claiming him. Backstage at his final shows, the scene played out in heartbreaking repetition. Brown would collapse into a chair after performances, gasping through asthma attacks while still humming melodies for upcoming tours. His band grew accustomed to seeing oxygen tanks tucked beside the red stripe in his dressing room. Yet when the spotlight hit, the man Bob Marley called the best singer in the world would straighten his shoulders and deliver. Hitting every crystalline note in Love Has Found Its Way, with heartbreaking tenderness. His last performance in Brazil weeks before his death became legend among reggae devotees. Weakened and gaunt, Brown clung to Mike's stand during Revolution, channeling his fading strength into the lyrics. Backstage footage shows him slumped over after the show, barely able to remove his sweat-drenched shirt, yet still discussing new song ideas with his manager between wheezing breaths. The end came cruelly on July 1st, 1999. Admitted to Kingston's University Hospital for respiratory distress, Brown suffered fatal cardiac arrest, his heart finally giving out after years of pushing his ailing body to perform. The news paralyzed Jamaica. Stores along Orange Street shuttered their doors. Sound systems across the island played nothing but Dennis Brown track for days. 10.
Made of sand in the wing of
The Last Lament, Delroy Wilson's final days. The cameras at Jamaica's Reggae's Sunsplash Festival in 1994 captured a ghost of the boy wonder who had dominated Jamaican charts since age 13. At 45, Delroy Wilson moved slowly across the stage, his once powerful frame diminished by years of alcohol abuse. Yet when he opened his mouth to sing Better Must Come, time collapsed. That voice, the same instrument that had defined Rocksteady's golden era, still poured out like honey, wrapping around the lyrics with undiminished tenderness. Backstage, the reality was starker. Wilson's hands shook as he tried lighting a cigarette between sets. His bandmates exchanged worried glances when he forgot the opening lines to Dancing Mood, a song he performed thousands of times. Yet when a familiar rhythm kicked in, muscle memory took over. His shoulders rolling in that old dancehall sway, his face transforming as the music flowed through him. His final performance came just weeks before his death at a small Kingston club. Regulars remember how Wilson leaned heavily on the piano during I'm Still Waiting, his breathing labor between verses. When a fan shouted, "Run, come, Delroy," the signature call from his early hits. He managed a weak smile before delivering an achingly beautiful cool operator that left the room in tears. The cirrhosis diagnosis came too late. On March 6, 1995, Jamaica woke to news that its first child star had slipped away quietly in his sleep. The cruel irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who sang, "I Don't Know Why About Life's Uncertainties" had left while dreaming, just as his career was experiencing a revival. 11. The mic never cooled Errol Scorcher's final rounds. The stage at Kingston Skateland trembled under stomping feet as Errol Scorcher, visibly thinner but still crackling with energy, launched into Roach in the Corner one last time in late 2022. The dancehall pioneer's voice, that signature mix of gravel and wit, still commanded the crowd, though those close enough to the stage noticed how he steadied himself against a speaker stack between songs. At 66, the man who helped shape Jamaica's sound system culture was burning through his final reserves to deliver a performance his fans deserved. Backstage, the reality was more somber. Scorcher coughed violently into a towel after his set, the unnamed illness that would claim him already tightening its grip. His road manager had to help remove his sweat-drenched shirt, but the veteran DJ still insisted on signing autographs, whispering lyrics to aspiring artists who came to pay respects. "The people give me this voice," he told a concerned fan. "Can't waste it resting." His final studio session, just weeks before his January 2023 passing, became the stuff of legend, wheelchair-bound and breathing with difficulty. Scorcher insisted on recording one last track, a reworking of a classic, Chia Pupil Lick, with a new generation of artists. Studio engineers wept as a fading star mustered one last burst of energy to deliver his verses flawlessly, his timing still razor-sharp even as his body failed. When news of his death spread to the dancehall community, tributes highlighted this relentless dedication. Competing sound systems observed a moment of silence, a rarity in the competitive scene, before blasting his classics at earth-shaking volume. Younger artists shared stories of Scorcher, coaching them through vocal techniques from his hospital bed. The footage from that last Skateland show now plays on loop at Orange Street record shops. Watch closely during No Bad Mind, and you'll see the exact moment when pain gives way to transcendence. Scorcher's eyes closing as the crowd's energy lifts him beyond his failing body. The man who helped invent dancehall culture exited as he lived, mic in hand, lyrics flowing, proving that for true reggae warriors, the show doesn't stop until the last breath leaves their lungs. 12. The show that never ended, Nitty Gritty's final days. The crowd at New York's Broadway International Club was still buzzing on the night of November 18, 1991, when Nitty Gritty toured through an electrifying set of his dancehall hits. Backstage, the 32-year-old star laughed with his band, plotting his next move, a return to Jamaica to record new material, maybe even a crossover album. His signature track, Hog in a Mindy, had brought the house down as usual, his rapid-fire delivery and playful stage presence proving why he stood among reggae's fastest-rising talents. No one could have guessed that in less than 48 hours, his name would be splashed across headlines for a far darker reason. 2 nights later, the unthinkable happened. Nitty Gritty, born Glenn Augustus Holness, was gunned down outside a Brooklyn barbershop in what police called a targeted attack. The murder sent shockwaves through the reggae world. Just days earlier, cameras had captured him full of life, mic in hand, commanding the stage with a charisma that made him a star. Now, his voice was abruptly, violently silenced. The mystery deepened as rumors swirled. Some whispered about disputes back in Jamaica. Others pointed to New York's rough reggae underworld. But no arrests were made, and the case grew cold, leaving behind only questions and a legacy cut short. 13.
Madness, we call it madness.
The final bow of the Scatterlight King, Prince Buster's last stand. The stage at London's Jazz Cafe trembled under stomping feet in 2005 as Prince Buster, then 67, raised his arms to conduct the crowd through Al Capone. His voice had lost none of its commanding boom, though those close to the stage noticed how his once indestructible frame now leaned on a cane when the horns took over. Diabetes and strokes had stolen much of his strength, but not the fire in his eyes as he led the audience through the ska anthem that changed Jamaican music forever. Backstage, the architect of Blue Beat moved slowly, his legendary sharp suits now hanging looser on his frame. Band members recall how he'd rest between songs with his head in his hands, only to snap back to life when the intro to Madness kicked in, his cane becoming a prop in the very dance craze he'd invented decades earlier. That London show, his last major performance before retiring, became a living museum of Caribbean music history. When he reprised Oh Carolina, the song that first fused Mento with R&B back in 1960, something remarkable happened. The crowd's roar seemed to lift him beyond his ailments. For 3 minutes, he was young Cecil Bustamante Campbell again, the tough teen from Orange Street who'd revolutionized sound system culture. Illness forced him off stage soon after, but not before leaving behind a final recording session in 2008, where, wheelchair-bound, he produced one last ska rhythm track by tapping his cane against the studio floor to keep time. 14. The music fell silent too soon for Leroy, the man who taught reggae how to talk. Ewart Beckford, the pioneering DJ who transformed Jamaican sound systems into launching pads for lyrical acrobatics, left this world in February 2021 after a lifetime of rhythm and rhyme. His passing came quietly after what would be his final performance, a fitting curtain call for the artist who turned microphone chatter into high art. Born in 1942, Leroy didn't just perform music, he rewrote its rules. His signature style of toasting over instrumental tracks became the blueprint for generations, from dancehall to hip-hop. Tracks like Wake the Town and Rule the Nation weren't just songs, but seismic shifts in how voices could ride a rhythm. That distinctive voice, at once playful and commanding, became Jamaica's soundtrack through decades of musical evolution. In his final days, even as his health faltered, the pull of the stage remained irresistible. Witnesses recall his last performances carrying that same infectious energy that first electrified Kingston's dance halls in the 1960s. There was no dramatic collapse under spotlights, just a gradual fading after one last communion with the audience he loved. The news of his passing at 78 resonated across the music world like one of his famous echoes. Tributes flowed from artists who owed their careers to his innovations, from Shabba Ranks to Kool Herc. But perhaps the most poignant memorials came from ordinary Jamaicans who remembered the man who would linger after shows, sharing stories and wisdom with anyone who approached. Today, when rappers trade verses or dancehall DJs ride the rhythm, they're walking paths Leroy paved. His physical voice may be stilled, but his artistic voice continues its endless version in every microphone that crackles a life over a heavy bass line. The originator may have left the stage, but his performance never truly ends. 15. King Tubby's tragic end came just steps from his studio, a place where it forged the very soul of dub music. The gunshot that cut him down in 1989 felt like a cruel silence after a lifetime of shaping sound, a final, dissonant note in a symphony of innovation. Some say his last dub mix performance wasn't just another session, but something deeper, a spiritual crescendo, as it had already begun his departure from this world. The echoes of his final adjustments to the mixing board linger in the minds of those who knew his work, leaving behind whispers of a man who wasn't just making music, but communing with it. His death, sudden and violent, clashed with the serene control he wielded in the studio. Tubby didn't just fade out. He was ripped from the track mid-beat, yet the rhythms he birthed refused to quiet. Every rewound tape, every bass, every drop, every space he echoes still carries his fingerprint. The legend doesn't end with a gunshot. It just slips into the dub,